Hi, and a very, very warm welcome to this, the latest Soul Trader podcast, or whichever one you're listening to them in whatever order. With me, Rasheed and Dan, coach, speaker, and author of Soul Trader, putting the heart back into your business. And this is a very special podcast for a couple of reasons, because today's episode is both visual and audio. So you can watch this on YouTube or and so on, as well as listen to it on the usual places. And it's also special because it's not just me talking to you today. Today I have a guest. And I'm very, very, very delighted with the guest that I have here today. My guest is Dan Silvestri. Now, Dan, some of you might know him, some of you might recognize actually, because Dan is a coach, he's a facilitator. Dan is sometimes assists on my Soul Trader and Networking for Success events. So when you see Dan in a moment, or if he's appeared on screen already, and then you might recognize Dan if you've ever attended my Soul Trader or Networking Success events, because he's there often supporting and assisting. And some of you may also know Dan from running the Soul Inspired Business Support Club, which is sponsored by Soul Trader. Dan, when I thought about today's topic, and I couldn't remember, Dan, just by way of introduction, right? I was thinking about it. I couldn't remember when I thought about doing this latest podcast. I can't remember if you came to mind first and thought, okay, what topic would be best suited for Dan, or whether the topic that came first and I thought this topic, Dan, is going to be ideal for. So just again, by way of wrapping up my introduction, then I'll let him say a few words about himself. Today's topic is all about overcoming setbacks. And in business, running your own business, there are many. When I thought about this topic, I thought, well, who can I invite to join me and who would be ideal for it? And Dan, I thought, would be ideal for a number of reasons. Dan is a coach and a business coach. But Dan has spent most of his life in and around business because he grew up in a family business and he's worked in a number of businesses. So I thought, and I happen to know that Dan's seen the highs and the lows of business. So Dan, a really warm welcome to you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you, Rash. Thanks for the invitation to be here and be on your show. And yeah, it's lovely to be here. It's an honor. So thank you very much because there's a lot of content that you've already put out through this podcast. And, I've tuned into many and as many others might know also and have heard from you in just what you share. You're very you give a lot and you share a lot in all of your podcasts, and so that's well, I'm really excited to be here and just to have a conversation with you around this and this topic of overcoming business setbacks. And I'm not sure from your intro is that it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I am someone who's been in business for a long time, and as you know, there have been many setbacks. Perhaps actually, it kind of there's been more setbacks than there perhaps has been, successes. But the successes have been so great, and I still am here in business and still here running businesses. So, as something about business as well, it's also um, always exciting and always keeping me on my toes and on my feet with things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to what we chat about today.
Fantastic. No, we're really delighted that you're here. And I also love the way that you use the word show. I like that this podcast is a show. And as soon as you said that, it allows me to say something else about you that some people might not know. One of the things that we also have in common, as well as being coaches and so on, trainers and facilitators, is that, like me, used to be a singer, performer. I still do sing and record. So the singing bit about singing. So there's been a rich career, Dan. I'm wondering, how would you, just for the purposes of the listeners and viewers, do you want to just say a quick word, a bit about yourself, what you do, and a little bit about your journey, just very briefly, just by way of just setting the scene?
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, as you say, now I'm a coach and a facilitator. I provide some therapeutic style works through hypnotherapy and various integrative modalities. Basically, I just really enjoy helping people and helping people um, to really come back to themselves and really to be able to observe and see life and what's going on around them, and so that they have the strength and the skills and the courage and compassion to move forward in their life, essentially. So they're not too held back by anything from the past and they're moving forward. So that's the sort of real coaching element. But I help people in many ways through their businesses. That's one thing that we have in common is that we both share this love of business. And thankfully, thanks to your sponsorship, we're able to run this program that we have, called a Soul Inspired Business Support Club, and I'm helping business owners at those early stages of businesses through that program, which is really wonderful. And I have such an interest in relationships and the relationships that we have of course, across the board with at home or in the workplace or with anyone. So I'm really keen to provide more coaching work through supporting people with their relationships and of course meeting yourself. You know, you're a wonderful one at pointing to ourself and really reflecting on ourself. And that's been a lot of my journey as well. And that's where I found there's been so many benefits and wins that have come from just becoming very self-reflective and being on that journey of just seeing myself and having that relationship with myself ultimately. But yeah, I have a passion for how we connect with others as well, and how it is that we connect with others in our businesses, in our workplace, at home, with our partners, children, all of this. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what the future holds in terms of my business moving forward. But at the moment, I provide many different types of services within the coaching space to helping people with um, their business and career, their home and relationships, and then their life and lifestyle and well-being, in a nutshell.
Great. No, that's really, really great, Dan. That gives a really nice picture. And then let's talk a bit about, because we're going to dive into this topic about business setbacks. You, you've been in a number of businesses, and maybe you're unusual in that many people will have had jobs, day jobs, and gone from a career into business. You were pretty much born into the business kind of world. So do you want to just say very, very briefly a little bit about your business journey? Because then I think that would just kind of help us then dive into this whole type of topic around setbacks. Because I think one of the things that jumps out to me, Dan, is that in the journey of starting and running a business, there are just so many setbacks that one can have, from personal, professional, commercial, emotional, all sorts of setbacks and challenges that can be there, as well as all sorts of wonderful wins and opportunities in business. But again, just as we set the scene to get a bit of a picture of you, could you tell us a little bit about your business, about your business journey, just very briefly?
Yeah, my family overall are generally quite entrepreneurial. You know, they're very entrepreneurial people. When I was born, my family had a taxi business, also a DJ business, and running around doing all kinds of different things, um, in these ways where that entrepreneurial spirit was there. So even in terms of my nonna, the allotments, she came from Italy and was a real grafter. She worked in other careers, but also she had this entrepreneurial spirit where she just saw life and things in a different way. And that entrepreneurial way, always sort of checking about what the next opportunity is here, or where's this next thing coming in from there, and would always, really graft and work hard to be able to provide for her family. And that, I think that lent itself into my parents' spirit, or at least my dad's spirit, not necessarily my mum so much, because that there wasn't much entrepreneurial spirit there. But I was born into a business that was a taxi business, taxi firm, and it really took off, and there was many drivers. It was a really flourishing business, and over the years of me growing up, the business itself changed, and it chopped from here and there, and it depended on things going on outside in terms of what's happening on a government level, in terms of the council, what's being provided here, there, and everywhere, and that might chop and change the business that I was seeing being run by my parents. In terms of it was once had loads of drivers, or many drivers, and then they kind of, as I was getting older, dwindled it down to more kind of private work and more airport runs, as opposed to just a local taxi firm. So there's lots of chops and changes that was going on. And then yeah, other kind of business opportunities whilst running these businesses were emerging, with discos and DJing and doing weddings and parties, all sorts of different things on the side. And as I was growing up, I think I had that instilled in me, and I was washing cars. I was going out selling bits of wood that I was shaving and carving out for the neighbors to put by their doors, and all sorts of things. That was just my way. And I guess I followed in suit. I was working as a newspaper round person, and I'd go into fish and chip shops, from whilst still working at school. So there's a lot there in my childhood of just this hard grafting nature. And then as I got older, I left school at 16 without money, academic um, propositions to my name. So I went and worked in someone else's small business, and quickly found myself. Um, getting into the management positions at 16, between 16 and 17. And at 18, I decided to go into business and go into a family business, a new venture that was a franchise. And then we were running that for a number of years. And that took off. It started with one site, and then we took two sites on and built up. And that was wonderful. There was lots of success within that. But at the same time, I was still grafting away, working hard in other jobs, just trying to get this business off the ground. And then there was property business on the side of this as well. So buying properties, renting them out, and sort of seeing where that was going to go. So lots of these other little opportunities off of the main kind of business that we were running. It was often the case that I was brought up, how I was brought up, and also then what I was doing in my early years. And then I guess there were many setbacks,
And we'll come on
many,
to
many
that. I mean,
setbacks.
so we'll come on to the setbacks, but just then to round it off, then when I met you, I know then you some of the last businesses prior to the coaching business, of course,
Mhm.
you ran a number of I think you ran I think a couple of hairdressing business and one the last one was a successful one where your clients included entrepreneurs and premiership footballers, etc., etc. So down from what the picture that you set out, a real rich, a real raft of different type of businesses and being there from very, 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 very early on. And then interestingly, you talked about things like being in management very early on. So Dan, I want to ask a quick question about that as we dive into this thing about setbacks. When you think about this topic, overcoming setbacks, when you think about setbacks in business, what first of all just comes to your mind? Because I think, for the purpose of this conversation and for people listening into it, I thought it would be just good for us just to explore around setbacks, different type of setbacks, how you've overcome them, how I've overcome them, different takes around about setbacks. And I think what's interesting to me is that for one person, a lot of it is perspective because what might be a setback for one person might not be a setback for somebody else, and what isn't may well be for somebody else. So, for when you think about this topic, business setbacks, just to put that on the table first of all, what comes to your mind immediately?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely, that perspective, because that's one thing that's shifted for me in recent years. Because initially it was a thought, what comes to my mind? Well, what's lost? If we're being set back, are we losing something? And that's, again, a mindset type of mentality to have if we're losing something, because not always all things are lost within a setback. And in fact, I reframe this now, and it was almost a sidestep. Each setback is more of a sidestep because are we really set back? We might in some ways, and on some level, it seem like that, but are we really set back, or have we just had more experiences that we're going to learn and take forward in our lives and apply and become perhaps a little bit wiser from those challenges? Because I think initially that's probably what comes to mind. It's a challenge. A setback is a challenge,
Mm,
and they are, and there are challenges, and there are different depths and levels of these challenges when it comes to setbacks, in my experience at least, and how I hear of it from others. But um, yeah, not to just put a positive spin in it for a positive reason, but I do think that perspective is really important to take here, and I think
mm,
it's really, really very nice, deep conversation to get straight into and to
mm.
then out there. So yeah,
Very
uh,
much. I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing. I like that thing about that, that you already point to the learning or the sidestep and actually the challenge. I guess what comes to my mind is that when I think about this, I think that business is a journey, and I think like any journey, if you're going on any kind of journey, you expect kind of setbacks, challenges. Today, ironically, recording this here where I've been in London. I know in the UK, we're both in the UK. It's been snowy, it's been icy, and there was a point in the day today where it was snowy. I had to get from one part of London to another to drop some things off the family and to do this and this. And then I was like, is the train's going to be running? Is this going to happen? Is there going to be delays here? I'm in my trainers. Is it going to become so snowy I'm going to slip over? So the point I'm making here is that in most journeys, if somebody's taking a car journey or whatever, they often expect delays, setbacks, and so on. So the first thing I think of about it with business is that just there will be many. There's going to be personal setbacks. There may well be setbacks with customers. There may well be setbacks going on in one's personal life. There may be the relationship, with the supplier, with a business partner. There are many, many, many different types of setbacks. So I think one of the first things I kind of want to say to anyone who's listening to this is that I think particularly if you're in the early years, expect setbacks, and actually not just in the early years, actually throughout. Because I think there can be this notion, isn't there, that you get things get up and running, and then that's the end of it. It's going to be smooth sailing. Actually, many people, there'll be growing pains. There are just different kind of challenges at different times. But Dan, one of the other things that jumped out to me before maybe we might dive into some of these particular types of setbacks is that when I just stopped and I was thinking about setbacks, I thought to myself, well, what kind of setbacks have I been through, right? And I had to stop and remember, because I think that my own take when it comes to lots of setbacks is I'm always focusing on the next thing. I'm quite pragmatic when it comes to those particular kind of challenges. So, I mean, I'm sure we might get into some of it later, but I had to kind of remind myself, like, oh my goodness, that was a setback, and there was that setback, and there was that setback, and so on. So, yeah, Dan, I wonder what we've got these different types. There's the personal and business related. In your experience, are there particular types of setback that you found the most challenging? That anything you wanted to, because there is that reality there, isn't it? That there can be all sorts of stuff that is thrown our way, and it can be very daunting, and there can be financial, all sorts of stuff. Have there been particular challenges that you found, oh my God, these ones are more challenging, these type of setbacks I find easier to navigate? Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, I guess it's probably easier to just share that some of my setbacks that I've experienced have been where I have lost it all. I've lost everything,
Mm,
in terms of I've lost the easiest one to go to is the financial loss that comes back with setbacks, and the financial challenges that can happen from setbacks if something doesn't quite go right. It doesn't, there's risks to be taken in business, and
mm,
every business has its level of risks, and sometimes we take riskier risks than other times,
mm,
depending on all sorts of factors. But losing everything, I lost relationships, personal, intimate relationships, family relationships, friend relationships, all sorts of relationships that I lost as a result of it, financial, and then to myself as well. I was just in the mix of it, losing a lot of myself within that as well. A lot of stress and strain put on just my life and where I'm at, what am I doing, how am I doing this? Because losing a house, losing a home, losing, an ability to actually move anywhere, do anything, because I went bankrupt. And that was a real big setback. That was a really difficult one. So it's one in which how do I actually keep going? How do I stop and look at this and figure out my way out of this? Because it was a case of here's a life being led in this direction, on that path, in this way, and with these potentials, these hopes, these desires and dreams. And then when it all kind of gets reset, and not just reset, but really kind of like reset and then put back over there, not just going to reset you to the start line, let's reset you and make things a little bit more difficult for you. It's then, okay, well, what do I do with that? How do I find the wood from the trees? How do I find a way through this? And also without the support, because yeah, the support network around me was what I lost in terms of family, friends. Thankfully I did have the core group of friends that yeah, super close with now. And I guess that's something, not all is lost when everything is lost. That's something, there's always going to be something that's still there and remains. And
right. Can
yeah,
I just dive in there with that, Dan? Thanks so much for sharing that, because I think that's powerful. And actually,
just a bit of
I think
context maybe about this conversation and ways we can take this conversation as well.
well,
So
very much so, because I think one of the things that jumped out to me for that, if I think about it, and if I think about the hat that I wear, being life and business coach, partner of the British Library's Business and Intellectual Property Centre, and speaking to lots of people, including lots of successful entrepreneurs, the thing that there were so many things you said that were powerful and that struck me, that actually when we're going into a business, that there is risk. I remember once before running one of my first entrepreneur workshops, it was called Making It as an Entrepreneur, and I thought I better look up what the word entrepreneur technically means. I was quite surprised that the definition in the dictionary was quite plain. It was like somebody goes into enterprise with a chance with risk of chance of success or loss, or risk. That thing about risk. Risk is inherent. And when one is running a business, there are so many things that are at risk, isn't it? The financial, we don't have the comfort necessarily of the day job. There can be many, many things. There can be supplier issues. There can be all sorts of things. And I think one of the things that's really powerful from what you said there was with you got to a situation where there was a cluster of things: personal setbacks, business and commercial setbacks, family and relational setbacks, the whole cluster of things. And of course, there can be a domino effect depending on what kind of setback one has. Dan, can I just ask, with that, which many people listening to this might think, oh my goodness, how on earth could you possibly, come back from that? How did you approach that? How did you overcome that setback or that series of setbacks? What did you do? How did you manage it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It kind of points to what you picked up on in that intro about my business journey. I got back on the saddle. I couldn't help myself. I mean, there was a lot of emotional pain, a lot of physical pain that came with losing so much. I was all over the place in many ways, and I was also young. I was in my mid-20s, so I was so young anyway, and having to manage and deal and cope with so much stuff that I just many people, whatever age, may not ever cope, have to manage and cope with. And I was there at mid-20s before my life had really started being reset and put back. But I, as I went in and I managed it mostly by going and getting a job. I started working for Royal Mail,
Mm,
went out and got a job, and just to kind of put a roof over the head, because actually at the moment lost a house. I was basically rendered homeless and nowhere to go.
mm.
And that was a big challenge.
It's a pragmatism, first of all, what I'm hearing, Dan, just for the purpose of
Mm.
people who think. So, first of all, I think it's powerful what you're saying. A couple of things there. There was that thing about getting back on the saddle. So, there's something, no doubt, in your psyche, in your being about just getting on with it. And then that pragmatism, that kick to in, actually need to, I need to be making money. I need to put a roof over my head and getting a job. Because I think that's also very important. Because sometimes when people think about business, they often think that there aren't options, and often with any challenge that there are options, isn't it? One, you're not wedded to always have to run a business forever. You can change. You can go back in, or you can get a job for the first time, or go back into the job. There are these kind of options. Anything else you'd share from that moment, Dan?
There's also was such a win with that because it made me pause.
Right.
Going bankrupt meant I couldn't earn over X amount more than I was. I just couldn't have any extras. Everything that I earned went to receivership and everything. I had just enough to cover the very basics. And there was something really beautiful in that because it made me really pause and have to slow down and stop because
Mm,
I was in a frantic mode of survivalship. Just surviving. I was just wanting to try and survive. But actually, it was refreshing to think, okay, well, I can't earn any money right now. What do I do?
mm,
I went and looked at my lifestyle. I just got into all the things that I, was into at the time and going out and enjoy it. But I'm kind of glossing over it because actually there was just so much pain and challenges to overcome as well in
mm.
terms of my own state and my own mind and well-being and everything. But there were just several bits of actually, to almost put the shackles on me and hold me down. I can't do anything. So that was really nice.
Just powerful, Dan. Sorry to pause you there, but I think again, I just wanted to just step in there because again, there's something you said that was very, very powerful. That there's a couple of things here. A, that you just had to kind of slow down and pause. You had to reset. I was also struck when you said there was something about there then actually also just getting on with some of those life things because sometimes the setbacks can be that we're so caught up in our business, that everything else takes a back seat or whatever. The same thing can happen, of course, for people in their career. So there was that element as well. So and then as you said, Dan, then you also said there was still the pain. So I guess there's this number of things. So the other thing that jumps out to me here is that a setback isn't necessarily just a moment. There might be some things that are momentary. There might be some things where there's that lingering impact of whatever it is that has been lost when it comes to setbacks. Dan, first of all, just thanks so much for sharing so much of that because I bet you so many people who are listening to this are thinking, my goodness, thank goodness somebody who's speaking really powerfully. I get that. I understand that. I've experienced some of that. Well, one of the moments that was very powerful in my career, again, there's a link with the British Library's Business and Intellectual Property Centre. Many years ago, their entrepreneur in residence is a lady called Rachel Elner. Rachel was one of the, on BBC Dragon's Den, one of the dragons in series one and two. And I remember meeting Rachel, I think the first time she was giving a talk at the British Library. And she was talking about her book at the time, which was called Business Nightmares. And what jumped out to me, which she was the first person I had heard talking about the downside and the setbacks, the things that we're talking about here, that there were setbacks in business. And you know what? Immediately, there was something that where I warmed to what she was saying, because I think there's something. I know the other reason why you're here is, we both share this kind of heart-centered and this compassionate side to things. So I thought there was something about this very authentic side to her, just talking about the highs and the lows. So Dan, it strikes me the thing that one place that I want to go to briefly, and wherever you want to take the conversation, is I have this saying, and I may have shared it with you. What is it that you win when you lose? What is it that you win? My life experience, if many of the setbacks, I've actually had wins. So, just very briefly, I was thinking about some of my setbacks. And I remember one of the setbacks that I don't think I can quite match you with some of the setbacks. Not that it's a competition, but one of the setbacks was I remember in the early years, my biggest client that was probably about I don't know 60% of my income. They shut up shop. They were an organization that actually supported business. I was delivering quite a lot of stuff for them. So they suddenly, and then all of a sudden, like 60% of my income is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So there's that kind of commercial thing. And I learned the lesson of not putting all my eggs in one basket. So for me, at that moment, that was my learning. I think I had to really learn to understand some things, some more things around and business. There was a learning there. Yes, it was a setback, it was a challenge. But like you had pointed out early on when you were setting things up, there's this learning element. I needed to learn that. I kind of theoretically knew not to put all your eggs in one basket, but I had made that mistake. And there are some times where one has to for a short period of time. There was another one, I think, COVID, when COVID hit, like many people in business, and I shouldn't laugh, there's many COVID, wiped out many businesses. But for me, when COVID hit, I was working with a client in the NHS, and the NHS were one of the first people to know about when we were going to be locking down, because it's the NHS supporting people who are going through the hospital system. So I remember sat in the meeting with these high-powered people and saying, "Okay, that's it. We're not going to be from tomorrow. There aren't going to be any external visitors." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be major." And I had to learn how was it going to change my business? Everything was so far delivering, meeting people in person, and we couldn't do that. So I had to change my business model. And then the third one that comes to my mind, which I'd forgotten about, and you'll be familiar with, and I shouldn't laugh about it, but there was a point whereby I had quite a major setback, and it related to kind of my vision. And there was a point where I was like, "Okay, what's going to happen? Da 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 da. Is this going to happen? Am I going to be able to see? Am I going to be able to do? Am I going to have to completely radically change things?" And I remember there's a point where I had to go to a hospital appointment. I was at a hospital appointment which was linked to this. And then I had all of these things in my order book. The business was very successful at that point. And it just became, obviously, you know what, Rasheed, you're going to just have to cancel this, and there's some, and that reality of that. So there's something for me, Dan, here about a acceptance, acceptance that challenges will come along, acceptance for me about the challenges that I faced in business. And there's something about, I think for me, with all of the challenges that I've had, I've learned a great deal. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things I wouldn't want to happen again. I also had a recent challenge. Actually, it was a trademark related issue. Might go into that a little bit later, but it's interesting. But then again, there was a lot of learning. So I think for me in business, all of the challenges, there's been a rich amount of learning. And I do feel the funny thing about business, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dan, is that there are some of those setbacks that's really hard to learn without actually having experienced it. There are some lessons that is really difficult to learn. And I'd love to know your thoughts about this thing about Dan, what have been the wins? What are the things that you've won and that you've learned? How is this? How is it? How have you grown from the many setbacks that you've seen and faced in your life and in business?
Yeah, I like what you're saying there in terms of those lessons that we need to perhaps, or not need to, but we find ourselves learning along the way when this happens or that happens, and we have to adjust to this and adjust to that, and maybe we got to pivot over here. Or we can I guess become quite reactionary to a lot of the things, and we're often then coming from a place. I know, I observe this with many people in business, that it's out of fear of, perhaps, I want to, I'll touch on this maybe a bit later, but out of fear of perhaps losing the lifestyle that we built if we have got some success. If those wins come and we're successful and we've built a lifestyle, and but then it can also harden up and we can become quite fearful of the lifestyle we built and whether we can maintain that. And there's then that causes, so that's almost a setback in a way of success, that can happen. But yeah, for the wins for myself, I think the largest, because on paper there's not many wins right now. If I was to look at things, and as I do, and actually there aren't many wins, because somewhat still coming out from the challenges of the things that were set back and reset and everything else. But actually, there's so much gratitude that's come forward, and that's a big win in itself. Just so much gratitude for who I've become as outside of all of this
Hmm.
messiness that's happened, coming back to myself, finding people like yourself who are business owners and business coaches, running their business and supporting others running their businesses and training people, all of these types of things. And to find people who are speaking about compassion and about perhaps offering what they are doing in a slightly different way than just where, a place that I grew up in and a world that I grew up in around business. When I was in the 90s and noughties, just observing how business was being run, and it didn't really feel great, as a child growing up in those places. And it doesn't float me to just be in things just for the superficial money, this and everything else. So it's actually enabled me to really dig deep and find meaning in my life, and how my life, in what my life is and what it's about, and about myself. And so the biggest win of all is just knowing myself a lot more,
Mm.
which enables me actually to really understand others and what they're going through, where they're at, and how that. And I couldn't replace that at all. I love the sense of feeling I get when engaging with other people, and what I can sense and feel from them through experiences of perhaps where they're coming from and whatever's going on in their life. That way of being able to connect with people is just such a win.
And I
And
was going to ask you about that, Dan, because I wondered, as you were saying that, one of the things that jumped to my mind was I was wondering to what degree consciously or perhaps unconsciously were some of the experiences that you had, what you'd seen in business where things were done well, where things weren't done so well. And, I know there's all sorts of relational issues and just how business is done. I know that you're somebody who cares very passionately about how we treat people in and around business. To what degree has that kind of informed, is there a direct link to your journey and why you do the work you do now? I'm just curious to know.
yeah, I mean, I think on one level there's a direct link, because there's been something from whenever it was, I can't tell when and why it's there, I don't know, but something just seems off, and there seems to be another way. There's another way here of doing this that's actually has perhaps consideration of people in the ways that one's treating perhaps suppliers, or their staff, or just clients or customers. Or there's always been something that seems like, I'm a service-led type of individual. All my business have been about being in service of others. So I naturally, I think, I've got this yearning for just wanting to provide a really high quality, trusted, caring, safe service for someone to engage with when they're when my in my it would, if they're coming into my retail shop or in my business now. There's no retail shop now, but there's something about the experience. I like to provide that experience for people. And I think, I don't know where it can, is there a direct link? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe, I think on a level there really is, because of feeling just, there is a direct link with my passion for setting business up with a foundation of something with substance, and
Mm,
that's a conscious substance. Because
right,
with the businesses that I've been in, there perhaps hasn't been that grounded, trusted, very sort of secure
right,
basin from which one's running their business from, and so that's very
right.
important to me.
So Dan, that's really powerful because again, as you speak there's a couple of things that jump out to me. There's something about this thing about setbacks, and you used a phrase earlier, and was there before we started talking today. I thought, okay, well, sometimes when there's a setback, one of the first things you need to do is actually just step back. You need to just step back for a moment. You need to just pause, and you need to just kind of think. And you were saying the things you were saying pointed me to a few really rich lessons, which is whatever the setback, there is an opportunity for you to pause and think, who am I? Where am I at? What's really important to me? What is it important in terms of business? How have I been running my business? Is there a better way of running my business for me commercially, for it to be sustainable, but also in terms of some things you're talking about in terms of how we show up, how we treat people? It made me think how many of the setbacks that we might have might be of our own making sometimes because we may not have seen signs coming with our customers or how we show up with people. Many of us who, for example, work for large organizations and so on, not just large, we can see that some things come from people not necessarily being treated well, or staff haven't been listened to, or all sorts of particular things. So I like this thing here about how there's this opportunity for us to go on a deep learning journey. And I love the thing that you also talked about, how it is that you come from a place with this thing about service and how service has been there at the heart of it. Dan, I'm mindful about time, so I wanted to talk about, for us to talk about a couple of things here. I was just thinking about when somebody is faced with a challenge, whatever the challenge might be. It might be a personal one, might be something that actually at home, completely outside of the business, that might well have gone on, something in their health or something that might have gone in their relationship, or maybe something's happened to a partner which has had an impact on the business. There could be just so many things, whether it's something that's happened in one's personal life or whether it's something commercial. It might well be something that's happened as a result of something broader in the sector or in the economy, because there are some of these setbacks you can't necessarily do anything about. That's just the nature of it. There are many people right now, and one of the things actually right now why this is really kind of relevant, I remember seeing something a while ago in the news, and they were talking about quite recently in the news that by 2035, they were talking about in the UK, 3 million jobs won't be there because of things like AI and so on. So we know that there are all sorts of different challenges that will happen at any particular time. But what I wanted us to begin to talk a little bit about was that when a challenge is happening, what is it that one should do? One of the things that jumps out to me, Dan, is that depending on the nature of the challenge, I think it's really important for somebody to ask themselves, what is this challenge? And what support do I have? Do I need? Is it one where I need that personal support, my friends or my family or my loved ones? Is it ones where I need professional support? Maybe I've got that network. I think, we talk about this. It's one of the reasons why we run the Soul Inspired Business Support Club. Is it one where I've got for example, my peer network of people I can reach out to? So I know, Dan, with certain challenges that I faced when I had there was an issue, a trademark issue. And the irony is that, just for the purpose of this and this bit, I remember that Soul Trader is the book Soul Trader, and I have the trademark for Soul Trader for a number of different categories. And I, for a while, was going to be planning to do my next thing, launch from it, Soul Leader, and somebody else had a trademark. Not quite called Soul Leader, but something along that. And then, how copyright trademark works, it meant I couldn't use that. And that's a big setback. Fortunately for me, whilst I'd spent some money investing in the course and various bits and pieces, and actually also a podcast and so on, so it wasn't insurmountable. But one of the things I did there was that I reached out to a number of my business contacts and colleagues who were exceptional, and I also reached out for professional support with trademark lawyers and so on. So I wanted us to talk a little bit about that. I think one of the things that's important, Dan, is that for somebody, whatever the challenge is, to be able to quite quickly assess, what kind of help and support do I need? Do I feel resourceful and resilient? Is it something I can resolve myself? It might be low level, or is it something that I need other types of support about? And Dan, I wonder if let's say somebody's been listening to you and they're going through some challenges in their businesses at the moment. Are there any things that you would say that almost are your checklist from your own experience of things for them to do when it comes to where to go to? Because it can be just daunting, isn't it? Overwhelming. You may not be able to see the wood for the trees. You might freeze for a while or whatever. Anything you want to share there, Dan, from your experience?
Yeah. I really like where this conversation's going and talking about these things, because I think this is where things get really interesting and can be very practically useful for people that perhaps haven't had such experiences of any setbacks. A bit like yourself, we don't know what we know until we have to really dig deep and start learning to know about these things, such as, IP, intellectual properties, and copyright this, and whatever it is. There's a bit of that we'll never know everything. So we'll learn that as we go. But I think for me, yeah, support is so up there as well. That was good, as you before you even said it. That was going to be my top one. Support in many ways, and I've had to tap into charities, supports with charities, to help me overcome certain bits about how to even navigate um, IVAs, bankruptcy, all of these sort of things. I had no idea what was happening. The actual challenge was for me. It was
IVA, for anyone who doesn't know, that's involuntary. What's it? IVA? I've got to remember what that stands for. I'm trying to remember what it.
Yeah, it's a voluntary scheme in which one can start paying back their debts via a very small amount over a long period of time. Before just quickly jumping on that one, a lot of my challenges because I was also a part of a fraudulent activity against myself. So that made things even more difficult as to where I navigated for the right support with the right
Mm,
people. So I think it's always about finding the right support for the right people that we're needing it for with what's going on in our business at that
mm,
time. I think really what comes to my mind though of my journey is actually taking ownership,
mm, mm,
taking true ownership over what's going on, whether it's our
mm,
fault or not. A lot of mine wasn't truly actually my own doing. It was people that I
mm,
was in business with.
mm,
But I had to take some ownership on where I was at because no one else was there to help me. No one else was there
mm,
to support me. I had to
mm,
find that myself and taking that responsibility for where my life was, even though it kind of, you know, there was a level of responsibility I took by,
mm.
perhaps being around certain people or this or whatever it was. But we think just had taken responsibility for everything in business is a real sort of safe, real good position to be in.
Right. This support, I love that. This taking ownership, I love that. I think that's so powerful and can be empowering. Anything else you want to just add to that list, Dan, there? Um,
Yeah, being realistic. I think just being very realistic over what's going on, what's happening, or whatever the challenge is, and we don't won't be able to cover our blind spots. Perhaps even just having a light glance over what are our blind spots, if there are any. Can we, have a conversation with someone about X, Y, and Z about what, bit of
mm,
that business networking, what's been working well or hasn't been working well in your business? What experience have you had that's been really tough? Having these conversations with other business peers, I think this
mm,
can be very valuable. We might not have that experience ourselves, but we can learn from each other's experiences if we find the right people. And actually, the deepest, not deepest, but one of the real ones that I faced was not being not was practicing non-reaction, being non-reactive to things,
mm,
just really sitting in
mm,
that, realism of where I am and
mm,
yeah, not reacting to the moment all the time and actually really taking that moment to pause and think. And it just provides so much benefits, I think, when going through these, whatever it is, the challenge that we might be facing, or even if we're not facing challenge at the moment, I think not to be fearful of challenges, not being fearful of if there is something that's going to happen and it might be the worst thing. Okay, I'm gonna, I will, manage that. I will cope with that
yeah. I
because we're
like,
human, we can adapt and we will, we'll find the right. And I think there's just that trust that maybe is the last thing to share, trust that if things do go pear-shaped, they'll be put back on track somewhere down the line and we'll take so much from that. So to really just enjoy everything about what we're doing, where we're going, how we're doing it. And whenever we come up against something, just take that moment to pause each time there might be something of a bit of something that's grating or not kind of smoothly moving forward enough, and then going again.
really powerful. I'm mindful that we're in that kind of beginning to this wrap up stage. I loved all the things you were saying there, Dan. I think for me, some of the things that I would say is that I think whatever stage one is in business, whether you're, pre-start, starting, you've been in business for some time, many years, whether you're successful or whether things are challenging, I think there's the thing about there's a few things that I think are key throughout oneself, one's own relationship with oneself, and fostering that kind relationship and caring relationship with oneself. Because I think there's something I was just thinking before that the flip side sometimes of setbacks is even success. Success, as you pointed to, can bring its own challenges. And what is success? What is it? Why am I actually going after things that I'm after going after? Because actually, often those things can also bring all sorts of other types of challenges. So there is something about developing that really strong relationship with yourself, developing that really a really rich mindset, that very pragmatic mindset. I think this thing about support for me is huge. I think that and there's loads of there out there, I think, for me in business. So I'd say it'd be also missing me with my British
Right,
Library,
the British Library is
my
one
British
great
Library business.
resource we both love, isn't it? That just has an endless amount of support there on at to hand, mostly for free, very easily accessible. I mean, I'm a big fan of theirs, so
Right, right.
yeah.
And I think that what I'd say to anyone is also that there are, I think for me, there are these all these different layers of support. Your own, the relationship you have with yourself, building your own peer network and strong network that might well be of other peers who are in your industry, so you can chat to them about things in your industry.
I
And
might actually just jump in there, Rash, and say that our home life itself as well,
spot on.
this is it, with ourselves, but just that the home life relationships and how they are can affect and impact our business. I see this all the time, and vice versa. Our business may have an impact and effect on our family life and home life, whether we're in a partnership with someone or not, or a relationship with someone or not. Just that being so strong is a real
It's very important. I was going to say that, that really for me, I always see it as like when I'm running some workshops, I talk about, okay, the relationship with yourself, then what is your own, then what I call it almost your inner circle. That might include friends, some family, everyone's got a different scenario. And then your peer network, that might well be people. I think it's always good to have some people in your industry because that they can really be helpful. And other people are just in any other business because having that broad network can be really useful. I think that knowing what professional bodies in your own industry do can be incredibly useful. So there are many, pretty much every industry, there's an industry body. One can get a lot of support very often from those places. And then, for example, depending where one in the world is, that, you get different types of chambers of commerce, organizations for small businesses. Some of these places can be incredibly useful. Some of them have legal support, other types of support, helplines, and so on. So I think there is something about whatever stage of business you are in, finding out what support's out there, building your own support network, helping people, taking an interest in other people's business to know that you're not kind of alone. Because I think one of the things I found is that I learn a lot through people. So whenever I have any kind of challenge, I will reach out to somebody. I'll reach out to a contact, a peer, or whatever, and to partly to sense check it or what have you. And I think you're so right, Dan, about those personal relationships. And I'd also say that sometimes if sometimes I'm mindful that people may also have challenging personal or home relationships. I know that sometimes, I remember early on in my business, that I didn't also want to worry my family with the early stages of me stepping into business. So my best friend was really powerful counsel in that particular time, even though they weren't quite in my sector. So I think it's building those different types of support. So Dan, we're heading very much toward the finish line of this podcast, and it's been really magical having you here and hearing these things here. Again, I just wonder for anyone who's listening to this, um, would you just really very briefly, succinctly, just share any just top tips again around about if somebody's going through challenges? So it might be, okay, here's my list. Do this. Look out for this. Could you just give us a few closing tips and suggestions?
Yeah, I think we shared many in terms of just that support, finding support and people around us. I think maybe let's begin with that. I'll wrap up and maybe share. It's just about that relationship with ourselves and finding that ease of just being able to see things in a certain way in which we're able to actually um, observe something of what's going on in our lives, or a tip of just finding a place that can become where we can become very centered and grounded and balanced within ourselves. I think is just so vital in times of any stress or strain or challenges or something that might be happening or something might be fearful of going on. People talk a lot at the moment, and I work with people with their anxiety and what's going on inside of them in terms of perhaps there's this heightened sense of anxiety going on, and I think the moment that we can settle ourselves and settle our nerves, settle our
Mm,
minds and everything else, I think then the clarity, as the first chapter of your book points to, the clarity then starts coming about, and that's where we can build confidence to just keep on moving and moving forward in the best ways we know how. So I think just finding a way to settle ourselves is the only tip actually I'm going to share, because I think that's so important. That can be a whole journey in itself and can take we can find ourselves in that space for a long time, just finding ways of setting ourselves in our lives with what's going on, where things are at, and all of that.
I
So,
really like that. I really like that, Dan, because I think that, if I think about, for myself and with lots of things, I think that this, and when I'm, coaching anybody, for me, so many of these things also, whatever the challenge or even day to day, start off with rest, sleep, wellness,
Mhm.
diet, energy, because whatever it is you're going through, you're going to need the energy to be able to go through it. And sometimes stepping away from things, be it for a minute, for half a day, for whatever, is really important to that well-being piece. Sometimes stepping away, because sometimes also with some setbacks, you can also have some setbacks that are also perceptional. So I like what you're saying about that awareness. I would also say it's really important. The more you can learn about yourself, as you point to, the more it is you can understand and begin to, and it's an ongoing journey, understanding your business, understanding the sector you're in, understanding the broader context, because then you may well be able to avoid other kind of challenges. And if you're working with peers, contacts, associates, and so on, just make sure you're building those healthy relationships and understanding each other, because then you may well be able to solve or resolve or not replay those things. I was saying that life is constantly teaching us lessons. The question is, are we listening? Are we learning? Are we applying? And I could see you were just wanting to add one last thing before.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I love what you're sharing, and I really enjoy that quote. It's such a powerful one, and I think I think I'm forever thinking about just where's the joy as well? Where is the joy in my life at the same time? Because a lot of this stuff can be heavy, it can be deep, it can be challenging. We can talk about all this, and we all have so many stresses and strains going on in our own lives and with our business and this and that, and but actually, when we talk about pausing and our well-being and resting and all of that good stuff, having the right nutrition and all of that, but where's the joy? Because the joy is really where actually all of that stuff it really settles. My nutrition is great as long as there's some joy with it. If I'm not joyful, then that nutrition is still going to get stuck in my body and it's going to get dense and hard and everything as well because I'm not feeling like myself. My thing for this year is just finding ways for myself and that I can encourage others to be brighter, lighter, and happier. And in whichever way, even if it's not at the moment, because this this journey of being in business is a tough one. It's a challenging one, and there's so many things that can get deep and heavy and all of the rest of it. But if we got friends and we got family and they can raise our spirits and help keep us on a high and keep us moving forward, then that what other wins are there than that?
And it's a lovely lesson for
Loving
the.
our life and enjoying it at the
I
same
like
time.
that, and it's a lovely point, isn't it, for the sole trader? Because I sometimes an advantage that sole trader may well often have, the SOUL trader, is that thing about running a business that they're genuinely passionate about and keeping in mind why you're running it and why you're in service. I love that point you talked about being in service. For me, there's that I find really useful, as well as and maybe a closing tip for me is that I quite enjoy the things that the times where they've got nothing to do. I love my job. I enjoy every moment of it. And I also love the time when I'm in the recording studio and I'm singing and performing. So I think that point you said about joy, I think is really important. Having those times that aren't about your business, with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones, or where you step away, because that often can give you all sorts of insights, be it that you're overcoming a setback or a problem or just for creative thinking in your business. Anyway, Dan, we could carry on for ages, but time, father time, mother time has made us run out of time. So, Dan, I know if people are wanting to find you, they find you on your website. Could you remind us what your website address is?
Yeah, thank you. It's farsideproject.co.uk and they'll find me on there. And on there is the link, of course, to our business support program that we're running again for a second year now.
Yeah, the
Um,
Soul Inspired Business
Soul
Support.
Inspired Business Support Program.
Well,
Yeah.
or when people listen to this, because my podcast has been going for like 10 years, people might be listening to this and however long time it might be running, but hopefully it will be running and you can join a cohort. But Dan, it's been such a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for just sharing such warmly and and so richly. I know that you provide one-to-one business coaching and life coaching, relational coaching, and so on, as well as the Business Support Club. So people, please do visit Dan's website if you're wanting to find out more. So, well, that's been this Soul Trader podcast on overcoming Setbacks with me and my guest, Dan Silvestri. Do feel free to check out all the rest of the podcasts in the series. The book, you'll probably know where to find it on a famous online website and so on. And feel free to join me and very often Dan for the Sole Trader course run in proud partnership with the British Library's Business and IP Centre and for Networking for Success. But for now, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for everyone for tuning in and all the best. See you on the next podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rash. Thank you for bringing me on here and having this conversation. It's been a great one. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're so welcome.